Good morning, everyone. This is Rima Nashashibi, founder and president of Global Hope 365. Our goal is to end harmful practices against women and girls, such as child marriage, human trafficking, and other forms of gender based violence here in the US. As some of you know, the recent research indicates that there has been 300,000 minors that got married in the US, mostly young girls married to adult men. 60,000 of those would have been considered a sex crime, which is statutory rape because of the age differential. And we're going to be talking about the harmful effects of minors getting marriage as young as 11 right here in the US. Also, just until yesterday, we had 44 states to go because only 6 states passed legislation to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions. And yesterday, we had a victory in Massachusetts when the governor signed the legislation that made no child marriage under 18, no exception, a law in that state, which is awesome. Now we have 43 states to go. And as you know, the US has signed, along with other 192 countries, to end child marriage by 2030 when they signed the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, SDGs, and especially SDG 5.3, which indicates no child marriage under 18, no exception, among other things, by 2030. So with us here this morning are survivor leaders of child marriage, and I would like to ask some of you who participated in this victory early on, because it's been 6 years in the making. What role did you play, and what led us to this victory? Sarah?
Well, I participated in the Massachusetts victory by providing survivor testimony, and that's something that many of us survivors, especially right here on the call, do consistently for bills that are proposed across the nation that attempt to end child marriage under the age of 18. So I, along with my survivor sisters, provided my written testimony to the committee, and I also participated in the Zoom hearing. So as each bill kind of progresses forward, there oftentimes is a public hearing where folks can sign up and provide testimony, and that's exactly what we do, and we try to show up and support each other, and that was my role.
Thank you. As you mentioned, the bill goes through committees, whether it's in the House, the Senate, or Assembly. It depends on the state and what they call their two various houses. And it starts with the committee. Then once it passes the committee, then it goes to the General Senate for their approval. Then it goes to the other house in that particular state. And then once it passes both states, and the Massachusetts bill passed unanimously, as you know, and it went to the governor, and he signed it yesterday. So this is usually the way that the bills go through the system. Any others that participated in this victory?
Yeah, Rima, I was able to provide written testimony for this, and it's been really my focus to try to make a difference in terms of the legislation, because I really feel that we can best leverage our stories because they listen to a story. It's very different from giving statistics. We are the face of child marriage, and our stories are impactful.
And would you share your stories also? And John, tell us about your role, and then would you also share part of your stories? And we want to hear from Genevieve too. As a survivor leader advocate, what led you, and what made you decide that when was it that changed that you've decided I'm not going to let what happened to me happen to others in this country?
Is that directed at me?
Yes. And Genevieve, yes.
For me, it was when I learned that child marriage was still legal in all 50 states. That was in 2018. And it was pretty heartbreaking to know that what I had experienced and endured was still happening across the nation at alarming rates. Um, and so it prompted me to use my voice and my story to influence change. And along the way, have met some awesome survivor advocates and made some really meaningful relationships.
Thank you. And Genevieve, tell us about your story and what led you to where you are today. And what state did your ordeal happen, the trauma that you went through as a child bride?
Sure. So my story begins at the age of 14 in Southern California. I lived in Southern California in the beginning of my journey. There was attempts made for me to marry my 43-year-old perpetrator in California, as well as Nevada and Utah. And ultimately, it was the state of Mississippi that allowed that to happen after other states had said no for various reasons. So I understood that the rules were different in different states, and somebody really determined to, continue this abuse, they're going to figure it out in a different jurisdiction, basically. What I didn't know is how often and how frequently it happened. So at this point, when I learned about it, would have been 2015. I remember it very clearly because I was sitting in my corporate office, with my secret of this really buried. So,
What was the
sorry.
difference in age between you and the perpetrator?
When we actually got married, I was 15 and he was 43. So significant age difference there. Anyway, when I was married, that was very isolating because I was removed from school. I wasn't allowed to or really able to hang out with my other peers, and it was just incredibly isolating, incredibly embarrassing, incredibly shameful. I was able to leave that situation, move on with my life. I became an adult, was able to continue my education, establish a different life for myself, and just kind of left that all behind me and was constantly trying to keep other people from knowing about what had happened to me because I was so ashamed of it. In 2015, learning how often it happened, how frequently it happened, that it's still legal in most states, and actually hearing other stories of, I know we shouldn't compare our trauma to others, but, it could get so much darker, than what had happened to me and been my own experience. I was truly horrified by it. My next question is this happening in my state where I currently live? Is this something that's happening in my community? And as I began to look into that, I discovered more and more just how significant the issue is and how much people don't want to talk about it. And they want to continue to sweep it under the rug and pretend like it's not happening. So I just decided that was not acceptable. And then it also was really a healing process for me as well, just knowing that I wasn't the only one that this had happened to, and really starting to process that and evaluate that. And I met with a mental health professional, and really was able to let go of a lot of that shame. But what had happened to me was wrong. It wasn't my fault. It didn't reflect on who I am as a person or my worth and my value. And so being able to really start to transform that trauma into purpose allowed me to have healing, so that, I'm able to turn around and then have more to give to my fellow survivors, my family, my friendships, my relationships, as well as the cause. Because being weighed down by shame and pain, it's exhausting, and it really prevents you from reaching your full potential. And so it's my mission not only to support other survivors and also, pass legislation so that, this just doesn't happen to any other children in the U.S., but also, to be that beacon of hope sometimes of what it's like on the other side, of shaking off that shame, of really healing, of being able to show up in healthy relationships and, have that mutual love and respect and honor in those relationships.
So tell us about child marriage in your state, Genevieve, and then we'll hear from the other survivors. What's the status
Sure.
of child marriage in your state?
Sure. So one, I live in the state of Indiana, and Indiana is one of the states that is not very good at data collection. This can be frustrating because just because nobody's counting doesn't mean it's not happening. So we don't have a good picture, legally, so to speak, of exactly what the issue is. Now, we know that it's much broader based on the calls that we get on the human trafficking hotline, the communication we have with law enforcement, of the family courts, child advocacy centers and whatnot. They're reporting of marriages or people going out of state to get married. At the time in 2019, I did learn that our current statute in the state of Indiana was you could be 15, and with a pregnancy exception and parental consent, you could get married. The minimum was age 15. We had advocated in 2019 to raise that age up to 18, but we were met with a lot of resistance because Indiana. Two reasons: Indiana doesn't have a statutory rape law. And unfortunately, we have lawmakers that don't really see an issue with adults having sex with children. And that is a much larger problem that definitely needs to be addressed.
Yes.
And so just that space of, still viewing 16, 17-year-olds as, sexual objects and that they're not worthy of protection or that they're still growing and developing is really disturbing. But unfortunately, that is the reality. So the age of consent also in Indiana is 16. And so it was a really hard ask to move the age to marriage, 2 years above the age of consent. So that's kind of that's the pushback that we got. And we did actually pass legislation to raise the age of marriage to 16 in Indiana. That went into effect July of 2020. There's also other protections in there, such as emancipation before marriage, which is really important. It doesn't always make a difference, but it is a step and a protection there, such as age difference and other things as well, just other protections just to try as much as possible. And so now we're currently looking back to see if that legislation is adequate in preventing, some of these difficult situations or if we need to go further.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're going to go now shift to California, and then we're going to talk about Alaska. Because I know both Elizabeth and Sarah and myself, we live in California. We know that we have, according to that recent research, 23,588 minors that were married in California between 2000 and 2018. And California did not keep statistics either until SB 273 passed, and it became in effect 1/1/2019. However, as we know, not all county were reporting to the state minors getting married in the state of California, and we're trying to change that. So I would like to hear from Elizabeth and Sarah. What have you been doing in the state of California? How did your story begin in California, and what are you doing at this time to change, to advocate to change and make it 18, no exception?
Well, first of all, there's no floor to the age of marriage in California, which shocks me and everyone I tell. They just can't believe that that could possibly be true. I was living in a cult in California when I was forced to get married at the age of 16 to a 28-year-old. I was taken to Nevada. I think they thought that it would be easier in Las Vegas than here, but they were wrong. It would have been just as easy in California. And I was tortured. I was taken out of the country. My passport was taken for 2.5 years. I finally escaped because I had a car delivered with a key on the tire when I was 18. And actually, I was 19 by that point. And so it was very traumatizing. And I thought I was the only one. It wasn't until 2015 when I contacted one of the nonprofit organizations that I found out that there were so many girls who were having this experience, and I just wanted to meet some. And luckily, I got introduced to these wonderful people, and we were able to hear each other's stories. And I just cried. I was like, I can't believe this is going on for others. And so since then, my focus has really been on testifying because I feel like that's the place that I can really make a difference. So I've testified in 4 states, actually speaking to the legislators, and in 6 cities in California, because we have a great strategy that has been brought about by you, Rima. I have such respect for you.
Thank you.
And that is to address it at the city level and get them to sign proclamations against child marriage, 18 no exceptions, and then bring that to the governor. Because we did not get this passed earlier when it was on the governor's desk. So we really need to make sure that we can make a difference. I've also sent letters to 5 states. I've had 3 articles published about me. You're welcome to look those up. And I'm here to make a difference. We have to end this. We need more people to know about this. We need this video to go viral. So forward it, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you. And just to add to what Elizabeth was saying, it was Senator Jerry Hill from Northern California in 2017 when he introduced SB 273 to end child marriage under 18, no exception in our state. And he thought it was a no-brainer that it's going to pass. To his shock, because a constituent brought it to him because a friend of hers was being coerced into marriage under the age of 18, and she was shocked. I mean, when our own Department of State issues a report in 2016 indicating that child marriage is human rights abuse in other countries, what about our country? What about our kids? Why are we trying to police the world? Why are we trying to save the children in other countries? And which is good, we need to do that. But we also need to save the children and protect the children in our country. If we're the world leader, we need to lead by example. Now, Sarah, tell me about what you've been doing. And I know you testified with us when we were trying to pass these resolutions in both cities and counties. So tell me about your story.
Yeah, so my story started out when I was 15. I was forced to marry a 28-year-old man by my dad, and my dad was a part of a cult as well. And it was a common occurrence for virgin girls in this cult to be married to older adult men. And so we were groomed from a very young age to believe that that was normal and that that was expected of us. And so when it happened to me, it felt like, you know, I was going along with what I had been told my entire life. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to leave that marriage for 7 years. And it actually took me 10 years to get a divorce. So 7 years to separate and 3 years to get a divorce in the state of California. And, you know, if I had tried to leave as a minor, I would have been turned away from shelters with my 2 children. I would have been homeless. And that is really the stark reality that child marriage survivors currently face in the state of California. Because in the state of California, children can get married at any age. Which should be shocking to the viewers here today. And it's really my hope that by sharing my story, that people will recognize the serious harms that we're putting our children into and want to protect them, because our children are our most vulnerable population. And if their parents aren't standing up for them, then we as a society really have to. And so that's really what led me to my advocacy work. And back in 2017, I was actually there testifying along with Don Tyree and other survivors who came forward and testified in person at multiple hearings. And unfortunately, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood both challenged that legislation and led to multiple exceptions being written into that law. Which now really doesn't do anything to protect minors, in my opinion. And it also, you know, just further kind of creates an issue where the state is validating a human rights abuse, which is child marriage. And I think that's the real issue, is that we know that adults having sex with minors is wrong. So why not just, you know, put that into law?
It's not just wrong, it's acceptable. It's shameful that our state and other states still allow that to happen. And I'm surprised at some of these organizations, because when minors get married to adult men, older men, they lose reproductive rights. They lose their choice. They have no voice. And so there's synergy in working together instead of trying to defeat these legislations that will end this human rights abuse and will end this trauma. Because as I know from what some of you told me, is that this trauma is still with you. You went through counseling. Some of you still have nightmares about it. And so it's shocking that we still allow it to happen. And we need to protect our children more. And I want to go now to Dawn. Dawn, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Because I know, thankfully to you, and I love all of you and respect all of you and the work that you're doing, because it is hard to come and talk about a trauma and the things that you went through publicly, day in, day out, because you've been with me we passed 12 resolutions in 12 out of the 34 cities in Orange County and in Culver City, and that's due to Elizabeth Sutton, where she approached the elected officials there, Daniel Lee, and he made it happen. And we're thankful for all those cities that passed it, because they're basically telling the state, no, it's unacceptable, no child marriage under 18, no exception. And I know, John, and thankfully, and thanks to you, you invited me to testify in Alaska. Can you tell us, I know tell us what state you were in when the trauma occurred, and then where did you end up, which led to us testifying in Alaska?
Thank you. My trauma started in California. I lived in San Pablo, California, and was being sexually abused for several years before I ended up pregnant. And when I ended up pregnant, the solution for the adults in my life were for us to get married. My parents and my abuser collaborated on basically how to save him from a prison sentence and how to save my parents from abandonment, child abuse, endangerment, all of those things. So the marriage protected all of the adults without any concern or regard for my life as a minor. And so when I did, my marriage took place in Texas. We were only in Texas for a couple of months, and we went right back to California. I became pregnant in California, married in Texas, went back to California. But the marriage could have easily happened in California, as we've been talking about during this session, is that there is no minimum age to marry in California. And when I tried to leave the marriage, much like Sarah was saying, I was turned away from shelters, turned away from the Department of Human Services, turned away from every single resource that I reached out, for help. The state didn't know what to do with me. It's like I was emancipated, but I had no rights. And so I couldn't hire a lawyer. I couldn't rent an apartment. I couldn't even enroll myself in school. I needed my husband's signature at 16 and 17 years old just to get myself in school. And so I was 16 years old with 2 children in tow and homeless. I had to divide and separate my family so that my children would be safe while I figured out, where we could stay and how I could get my feet on the ground. And so that is my driving. That's the force behind my advocacy work.
So what led you to Alaska?
Alaska became our refuge. I mean, if you talk to residents of Alaska, there are natives and there are people that will quite literally say that Alaska is where everyone goes for a second chance. And I had done my homework. I mean, I spent hours in the Sacramento Law Library trying to figure out how I could take care of myself and my children as a minor. I was an adult when I fled the state of California and went to Alaska, but I knew if I could get myself to Alaska and fly under the radar for 6 months, that Alaska would then have jurisdiction over our lives and my children. And so if my ex were to catch up to me, I wouldn't have to leave this state. I could stay there safely and then go, go from there as far as court proceedings.
Okay, great. And thank you for inviting us to testify in favor of House Bill 62,
Yeah.
introduced by Rep. Matt Clemens. We're thankful to him. And we testified in front of the Senate Health and Social Services Committee first. And we supported the bill and we asked them to go one step further, 18 no exceptions, because the minimum age in Alaska is 14 and the bill asked for it to be raised to 16. But we asked them to go one step further and make it 18 no exceptions. And the chair of that committee said, I hear you, bring me the amendment and we'll vote on it. And the amendment was done timely and there was a vote on the amendment. And then it went to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And it passed the Senate Judiciary Committee to raise it from 14 to 16. And they said, come back next year for 18 no exceptions. So at this time, we are so thankful for those legislators that hear the stories and hear the pain and hear the trauma that the survivors went through. And when they're saying enough is enough, we don't want this to happen to other kids. This is unacceptable to happen here in the US and any other country. And so now we're still waiting for the governor to sign it, John, in Alaska, House Bill 62.
I have not received an update in several weeks.
Okay.
And so as far as I know, it has not been signed, which is disappointing. I do hope it gets signed, but as most of us here would agree, it doesn't matter anyway. We know that 16 and 17-year-olds are at greater risk, and we wanted 18 no exception legislation passed anyway.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Because if you cannot vote until you're 18, you cannot sign a contract until you're 18, you cannot drink until you're 21. There's a reason. A lot of people in the medical profession, when I talk to them, they said we're not fully developed, especially our brains, we're not fully developed until 25, 26. They wanted to see the minimum age raised to 25, 26. And we're saying we're having a hard time with 18, let alone 25, 26, right? And so, yes, we need to get to 18 no exceptions in all states. We have 43 states still to go, and we hope it's going to be easier and faster because, again, we signed off on SDG 5.3 saying we, the U.S., will end child marriage by 2030. I want to give all of you a chance to give a closing statement. What would you tell the public in order to raise awareness about this issue, get them on board with you, with us, in order to end child marriage and make it no child marriage under 18, no exceptions? Elizabeth.
Well, for me, I think it bears repeating that there are states that do not have a floor to the age of marriage, and that we have 8 states that are in that bucket. It's extraordinary to me. And you cannot walk into a tattoo parlor until you're 18. You cannot tan in a tanning bed until you're 18. I mean, these laws are outrageous that we can get married with, at these young ages. So for me, you can join our mission, Global Hope 365. You can become an advocate with your own cities, with your state. You can engage any of us in testifying in your state. So we will not stop until this stops. And we're sacrificing a lot by telling our stories. I have a job, I have a profession, and it's a lot to tell this story. I'm actually writing a book about my story. We're trying to get it on a streaming service. We have a screenplay right now with a major studio. So hopefully we raise awareness about this important issue. Thank you, Rima.
Thank you so much. Sarah.
Yeah, Rima, I think that the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway that I hope that viewers will take with them is that 18 is the age of majority. And that is the age when you share the same rights as an adult. And that is why we need to end child marriage. Under the age of 18, no exceptions, because over the age of 18, you can access shelter services. You can sign a contract, you can enter into a lease, you can do all the things that will help you escape from a divorce that, from a marriage that you don't want. Under the age of 18, you're trapped in a marriage that you cannot escape legally or otherwise, as Dawn has bravely told her story of having to escape to Alaska just to be able to live a life. And so that is why we have to change these laws, because if you allow minors to enter into a marriage, there has to be an escape valve. And unfortunately, there's not. And also, it's just wrong.
It is, as one radio talk show host told me when I was being interviewed on her show, she said that's pedophilia.
Exactly. And
So
in any other context, what happened to all of us is pedophilia. But because the law allowed it to be called a marriage, it ties a bow on it. It makes it look pretty when it's actually a very ugly and disgusting thing. Child marriage is child trafficking, is abuse, is pedophilia, it's rape, and let's call it what it is, because that's what it is, and it needs to end today.
Thank you. Very powerful statement. Dawn, your closing statement.
Thank you. I want to speak to statutory rape. So we have this federal law of statutory rape that is a crime punishable by a prison sentence if an adult has sex with a minor. Then we have the child marriage umbrella. The moment that this adult marries this child, they have an umbrella over them from before the marriage, the crimes that were committed against the child before the marriage, during the marriage, and after. Like at no point is this adult who is a predator, a pedophile, can ever be held accountable, even after the victim escapes. Like we can't press charges. This is totally insane. At the federal level, a few years ago, we changed the law to purchase tobacco from 18 years old to 21 across the nation. So we're protecting like 18-year-olds from buying cigarettes by making them wait until they're 21 years old, or vaping now. But we're allowing child marriage to happen across the nation. It absolutely makes no sense to me. So my call of action right now is to stand up and to spread awareness and to contact your state representatives and legislators. Learn and know what's happening in your state so that we can make a change.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you can go to Global Hope 365.org on the child marriage tab, and where you can advocate with a push of a button and send a letter, no matter which state you're in. Send a letter to your elected officials that say no child marriage under 18, no exceptions. You can also pass a resolution in your city or county. Send us. Again, you can fill the form on the website and indicate, I would like to pass it in San Diego City, for example, and say, or whichever city you live in, or Marin County, if you live in California, or any other county. And we will personalize that resolution for you, for your city or county, because we need to end child marriage under 18. No exceptions. And before we get to Genevieve, to support what you said, unfortunately, when we were Global Hope 365, we had a booth, thankfully, for President Verge of Cal State Fullerton to raise awareness about child marriage and human trafficking on campus. One of the young ladies came to me and she said she was raped at 14. And the rapist contacted the mother and convinced the mother that they need to get married so he can get out of jail, so he doesn't go to jail. So it's a jail-free card. Marriage to a minor is a jail-free card for adult men who think it's okay to have sex with a minor. And she's still going through that trauma. If it wasn't That was the first time in 10 years that she talked about it because she saw we were on campus and trying to end it. And if it wasn't for her dad who said, absolutely not, I will not allow my daughter to marry that rapist, she would have to go through that trauma that you all went through. But she's still going through the trauma of rape till today because she came to me at the last day we were on campus and said, can you give me a hug? It's very difficult for me. And so we are thankful for that parent who stood for his child and said, absolutely not. I will not allow my child to marry her rapist. I will not get him out of jail. I will not give him that jail-free card. And thankfully, that rapist, they filed a restraining order against him and he did serve jail time. And so, Genevieve, close us out. What would you address? How would you address elected officials who are either sitting on the fence or they're saying, you know what, we don't need to do this now, or no, it's okay, we don't need to do anything about it? What should we tell these elected officials?
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this collaborative effort to raise awareness and get the word out. I always appreciate these invitations. To elected officials, I would say that just because no one's counting doesn't mean there's a problem. So if you've identified one victim, there are probably 10 behind that other victim at least. So, we're not creating studies, we're not looking into the issue, but it doesn't mean that it is not there. We have survivors that are using their voice, that are speaking out, saying, hey, here's the issue, we're highlighting it for you. But also remember that this is a team effort. We need legislators to, take a look at the issue. We need them to sponsor bills. We need them to champion our bills. We need organizations that work to protect children on our side, on our coalitions, and raising their voices as well as communicating with legislators, as well as survivors, as well as, soccer moms and kindergarten teachers and everybody, because until, we're all safe, none of us are safe, and one victim is too many victims.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for advocating to end child marriage under 18 in the US. You are awesome. You are the heroes. You are trying to protect the future generation of minors that it's allowed to have sex with a minor and you won't go to jail, unfortunately, in the US. So please go to globalhope365.org or CA Coalition to End Child Marriage.org in order to do something about this and send a letter to your legislator. Get educated on the topic. Send a letter, a digital letter to your legislator in both the state and federal level through the push of a button in order for us to end child marriage under 18 sooner. Thank you so much for the survivor leaders that we had today, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.